Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Sa dinami-dami ng mga nagaganap sa ating kapaligiran, hindi maiwasang magtanong ang mga mamamayan kung totoo ba ang kanilang nababasa, napapakinggan o napapanood sa iba't ibang padaluyan ng informasyon. May nagsasabi na depende sa padaluyan ng mga balita, ang balitang nababasa, napapakinggan at napapanood. Sinasabi po ng freedom of expression ay mayroon ding hangganan at ito'y depende sa kalayaang ibibigay ng may-ari ng network. Hindi ligid sa kaalaman ng madla na maraming mga pangyayaring naganap at nagaganap pa sa ating bansa mula sa PDAP, sa DAP at iba pang mga issue. Ito po ang pinakapaksa natin ngayong araw na ito, current events. Tell us what's going on. Anyare? O anong nangyari? Kasama po natin si dating Senador Francisco Tatad, isa sa pinaka-controversial na tao mula nung mabanggit yung tanghalian. At alam na po ninyo kung anong ibig sabihin ng tanghalian. Bagamat wala si Kapaeng Mariano, narito po naman si Ginoong Christopher Garcia. Siya po ay mula sa alyansa ng mga manggagawang bukid sa Hacienda Luisita upang magkwento kung ano naman ang nangyayari na sa Hacienda Luisita. Narito rin po naman ang dating National Security Advisor, si Ginoong Norberto Gonzales. Siya po ay naging Defense Secretary at siya po ang isa sa itinuturo kung bakit nakauwi si Norberto sa Pilipinas. Yeah, we'd like to hear from him as well. Narito rin po si Professor Richard Heydarian, ang pinaka-junior sa ating panelist. Siya po ay isang lecturer ng Political Science and Development sa Ateneo de Manila University na pinagtapusan ni Pangulong Aquino. Siya po ay consultant ng Philippine House of Representatives at ng Frederick Everett Stiftung sa Manila. Mamamahayag din siya sa Huffington Post sa New York at sa Asia Times sa Hong Kong. Isa rin dalubhasa sa geopolitics. Madalas makapanayam ng mga taga-Bloomberg, New York Times, China Central Television ng Beijing, Russia Today, Tehran Times, Business Mirror at maging ng China Radio International. Tinatapos niya ang kanyang ikalawang aklat na nagsusuri sa Philippine Foreign Policy. At ako'y natutuwa na mayroon palang ganun na Philippine Foreign Policy. Kaya dapat isulat. At ito'y may kinalaman sa South China Sea. So, simulan natin ang ating talakayan. Basic question para kay Senador Tatad. Ano po ba ang kasaysayan nitong PDAP at ng DAP? At meron nga bang tanghaliang naganap? Simulan natin.
Meron po tanghaliang naganap. Hindi pa po pinagbulaanan yan ng aking mga original informants. In fact, meron mga dumarating na impormasyon galing po sa ibang dako na kino-confirm po yung istorya. No? At maaaring lumitaw ang identity ng mga ito. In fact, yung hamon ni Ginoong Lacerda na siya magbibitiw pag mapatunayan, nung nakausap ko yung original source ko, sabi niya, ako ilalabas kung sabihin ni Lacerda na yung buong gabinete ni Pinoy ang mag-resign kung mapatunayan na nagkaroon nga ng tanghalian. No? Okay. Hindi niya sinasalit si Pangulong Aquino doon sa kanyang terms na binanggit sa akin. Pero sabi, pag sinabi niya na yung cabinet o kahit na yung mga nandun lang sa Malacanang nung panahon na yun ay magdidimiting lahat, lalabas siya para patunayan yan. No?
Sa parang comics po ito, aabangan ang susunod na kabanata.
Abangan. Okay. Pero okay, lampas na tayo doon, Melo. Kasi nasa bigger picture na tayo. Ano ba yung DAP? Anong kasaysayan yan? Sa aking pakalam, at yun din siguro ang pakalam ng nakararami sa atin, yung kasaysayan ng DAP ay nag-umpisa nung magdiskurso si Jinggoy Aquino, Jinggoy Estrada. At binunyag niya yung mga na ipamahaging salapi pagkatapos ng impeachment trial ni Corona. Kinonfirm ni Drilon yung kanyang sinabi at kinonfirm ni Abad At sinabi lang na, okay, may pera, pero hindi suhol yan, incentive yan, stimulus fund yan, nanggaling yan sa DAP, Disbursement Acceleration Program, bago naging Drilon Abad Pinoy Fund. Ano? Okay.
Ganun nga po ba yun?
Ngayon ang tawag niya. Okay. Pero walang legislative history kasi hindi po dumaan sa Kongreso. Kaya nakasampa po yan sa Korte Suprema para tingnan yung constitutionality nung pundo. Pero dalawang issue po, ano? Legal o illegal ba yung pundo? Pangalawa, yung gamit, siguradong tanggap na ng bayan na yan ay ginamit para bilhin ang boto ng mga senador. Illegal, totoong illegal ang paggamit yan. It's really a bribe, no? As far as we can understand it.
Opo. Brief question, Senator Tatad. The President was quoted as saying, impeach me if you can.
Malakas ang loob po niya. Kasi nga, kung halimbawa may impeachment complaint, ang una niyan, culpable violation of the Constitution. Yung treason, hindi kasali. Yun ang pangalawang ground for impeachment, treason. Then, bribery, graft and corruption, other high crimes, or betrayal of public trust. These are the grounds for impeachment. Yung halimbawa, tumutok tayo sa bribery, sino ang sinuhulat? Yung mga congressman at senador na siyang magpapasya ngayon sa impeachment. So, tama-tama, impeach me. Sino magdidesisyon yan? Yung mga kasama niya sa krimen, no? Partners in crime. Paano uusad yung impeachment complaint? Hindi magiging kaso yun. Hindi darating sa Senado yun. Palagay mo nang dumating sa Senado na halimbawa makuha ng third force yung 98 votes na 1/3 of the 292 members of the House to impeach the President. Pagdating sa Senado, ang nakaupong senador ngayon, 24. Diyan sa 24, yung 17 yan tumanggap ng tinatawag ng DAP. Okay?
Namantikaan.
Namantikaan. Pero bukod sa DAP, yung sinasabi nila na after the fact lang, hindi yun eh. Lumalabas na sa DBM website na lahat sila tumanggap before the vote on Corona. At mas malaki yung natanggap nila before the vote. 1.12 something. Ano? Okay. Nandito at sa artikulo ko ngayon yan. Lumabas sa standard. No? So, ayun, 17 tumanggap. Ano yan? Magre-recuse yun. 17, di ba?
Hindi sila lalahok.
Hindi maaaring lumahok kung may delikadesa. Okay? Ngayon, ang matitira, 7. Yung 7, 2 old-timers dyan na hindi tumanggap ng DAP. Si Miriam at saka si Bongbong. Yung 5 bago, unang-una si Bam Aquino, ay pinsan ni Pinoy. He'll have to recuse kasi mayroong personal interest. Si Angara, member of the prosecution panel nung naka-impeachment ni Corona. At anak siya ni Edong na tumanggap din ng DAP. So, magre-recuse yan.
Tumanggap.
Pagkatapos, sino pa ba? Si Villar. Asawa ni Manny Villar na tumanggap din. Di magre-recuse din, no? Sino pa ang pangapat? Si Nancy Binay, kung anak siya ni Jojo Binay, Vice Presidente, who stands to benefit from the impeachment kung ma-convict si Pinoy, di magre-recuse din yan. Ang hindi lang magre-recuse kasi walang pakialam si Grace po. So, may isang baguhang senador na hindi kailangan mag-recuse, 2 old-timers na hindi kailangan, 3 lang natitira sa 24.
Ngayon, Pimentel.
Hindi, tumanggap eh. Sali yan eh. So, you need 16 votes to convict. But you cannot even constitute a court kung wala kang quorum. Okay? Ngayon, kung halimbawa, walang delikadesa ang mga ito, kapapakapala ng mukha, okay, no recusal, lahat sila umupo doon, may problema pa rin tayo. Kung mga kapanalig sila ni Pinoy, palalampasin ba nila yung articles of impeachment? Will the complaint be tried forthwith as the Constitution provides? Baka hindi. Ngayon, sakaling payagan nila na, okay, let's give due course to the articles of impeachment. Sino ang magpe-preside? Under the Constitution, dapat Chief Justice mag-preside pag ang Pangulo ang na-impeach. Pero yung Chief Justice ngayon ay niligayan niya ni Pinoy pagkatapos na matanggal si Corona. So, masyadong malaking skandalo ito pag siyang magpe-preside kahit na wala siyang boto, hindi magkakaroon ng impeachment trial kung walang presiding officer, no? Ngayon, hindi sinasabi ng Constitution kung sino maaaring pumalit pag hindi pwede yung Chief Justice. So, maraming problema. Okay. So, alam ni Pinoy yan na ganyan ang sitwasyon, kaya impeachment ang sinabi niya. Hindi mangyayari. Pero dapat sinabi niya, oust me. Oo. Dapat ang hamon niya sa bayan, tanggalin niyo ako kung gusto niyo. At iyan, itatanong natin sa bayan. Tatanong natin yan kay Secretary Gonzales.
Mamaya ng konti. Mamaya natin pasasagot kay ka-Berting niya. Tanong ko muna si Christopher Garcia. Kumusta na ba kayo sa Hacienda Luisita? May grasya na ba? May lupa na po ba kayo natanggap?
Una-una, magandang umaga po sa ating mga taga-media. Sa inyo po kay Professor Richard, kay Senator Tatad, at kay Mr. Gonzales. Actually, sa amin po, sa loob ng Hacienda Luisita, ay na-proseso na po yung Tambiola system na di man ipamamahagi ng lupay ng Hacienda Luisita. Bagamat sa amin sa organisasyon ng Ambala ay mariin namin tinututulan ito. Dahil ang pamamahagi po ng lupay sa Hacienda Luisita ay peke at tuwad na wala naman talaga sa batas na dapat yung isang lupay na ipamamahagi mo idamo sa Tambiolo. Unang-una po yung amin pong mga sinasaka ay idinaan pa po. Kung halimbawa yung isang beneficiaryo, nagsasaka ka, idinaan pa po sa Tambiolo yung lupay na yun na malaki po yung pakinabang namin sa lupa kasi sinasaka na po namin yan na dapat hindi na kami alisin dyan sa lupay na yan.
So, ira-raffle pa pala kung saan kayo mapupunta. Ganun po ba yun?
Apo. Katulad po ng ating mga beneficiaryo na nagsasaka, sila po ay napunta sa Barangay Pando po na ang layo po ay 10 kilometro na nakarin kung ikaw ay magsasaka na malaking pahirap po sa amin. Kung kami po ay pupunta doon at magsasaka kami, kailangan namin gumastos ng 300 piso para lang sa pamasahe papunta ron at pabalik na ang halagang 3 piso po ay malaking bagay na po sa isang araw na pagkain ng aming pamilya.
So, ibig nyo sabihin, wala pang nangyayaring aktual na paglilipat ng mga magsasaka sa lupang ipinangako sa inyo?
Wala pa po. Huwad pa po at peke po yung pamamahagi ng lupa na ginawa ng Departamento ng Dar. Pag-uutos po ng ating Pangulo.
So, may raffle pa pala?
Actually, natapos na po yung raffle. Then, ngayon po, ang week na to, pinapatupad na nila yung pamamahagi ng CLOA, yung Certification Land Ownership Award na nauna pong ipatupad ko sa Barangay Pado.
May pangalan po ba yung CLOA?
Yun po, base po sa aming impormasyon na nakalap ay certificate true copy lang po ang binibigay ng tagadar at yun po ay walang pangalan, blankado. Ibig po sabihin, yung magsasaka, ikaw na yung maglalagay ng pangalan mo doon sa binibigay nila na supposed to be, na sinasabi nila ang original ay hawak ng land bank. Which na, kung yun ay Xerox copy na nasa iyo, ibig sabihin po yung nasa land bank ay wala din pangalan.
Okay. Pagtatanong ko yan sa Department of Agrarian Reform, magandang issue yan. Meron naman akong cellphone nung kalihim doon, maitatanong ko mamaya yan. Okay. So hanggang ngayon, wala pa rin?
Wala pa po.
Okay. Matanong ko naman si Berting. Sa mga pangyayari po ngayon, Secretary Gonzales, being Defense Secretary and being National Security Advisor, do you see some storm clouds in the horizon? Meron bang namumuong sama ng panahon para sa administrasyon?
Well, kung panahon ng pag-uusapan, masamang-masama ang panahon. Pero kung may mangyayaring mabuti para sa bayan, if we're looking towards the possibility of government change, there are certain elements na kailangan lumabas muna. Sa ngayon ay wala pa. Iyan ay kung ang gusto nating mangyaring pagbabago sa bayan ay mapayapa. Kung titingnan natin ang kasaysayan natin sa Pilipinas, kapag ang militar, for example, ay gumawa ng isang paksyon at nag-launch ng kudita, laging talo. Pero kapag ang armed forces ay kumilos bilang isang institusyon at kumampi sa nakita nilang talagang nagdadala ng sentimiento ng bayan, nananalo sila. Na nagiging successful ang pagbabago sa bansa. Sa ngayon, meron tayong kaunting problema kasi lagi nga sinasabi ni Senator Kit, wala pang tunay na oposisyon na lumalabas eh. In the absence of an opposition, saan kakampi ang armed forces?
Ang problema po pala hindi makilala kung sino yung oposisyon. Ganun ba yun?
Kasi napakaganda sana na nangyayari ngayon na kung pagbabago ang pag-uusapan, magandang nangyayari kasi buhay na ang bayan eh. Nakita natin yan. Sunod-sunod na ang hangaring magkaroon ng pagbabago sa bansa. At kung pakikinggan mo yung media na hindi nababasa sa dyaryo at nababasa lang sa mga computers, ay talaga namang maigting at talagang napaka-seryoso na ang daing ng ating sambayanan. Pero, ang importante dyan kasi, sa pagkaroon ng pagbabago, there are certain elements that you need. For example, pati ang mga faith communities o mga simbahan. Palagi ko, ang mga yan ay nag-iintay lamang. Dahil nagkataon na sa Pilipinas, meron na tayong formula of change na sinusunod eh. Meron na tayong tradisyon.
May template na.
May template na tayo, EDSA 1, EDSA 2. Pagka umalsa ang taong bayan na may namumuno, kinampihan ng mga simbahan at kinampihan ng armed forces, game over. Di ba? Pero ngayon, ang mukhang ang missing ay yung sambayanan. Hindi tayo nakabubuo ng isang liderato na magbibigay ng talagang pamumuno sa bansa. Kaya nga ako kanina, kahit na kumakain ako ng breakfast, sineryoso ko yung pagbasa kay Senator Kit Tatad eh. Mukhang may mga formula doon. At saka natatandaan niyo yung sinabi din ni Chief Pedrosa. I think ang sambayanan, kung babasahin nila yung mga artikulo ni Chief Pedrosa at saka yung artikulo ng Senator Tatad, nahandyan ang formula.
Mm-hmm. Hindi kayo ma-inciting to rebellion or sedition?
Hindi, STC kitang ikukulong, hindi ako. Ako naman sinasabi ko lang yung mga nababasa ko sa dyaryo di ba?
Okay. Maliwanag po. Professor Richard Heydarian, kayo ay mula sa academe. Sa inyong pagsusuri, itong mga hindi pagkakaunawaan, itong mga expose na ito, saan ito makararating at anong epekto nito sa imahen ng Pilipinas sapagkat sinasabing it's more fun in the Philippines? Professor Heydarian.
Sa tingin ko, more fun pa rin naman sa Philippines ngayon kung titignan mo how this issue over corruption has been gaining pace. Sorry lang, mag-switch ako sa English.
Ilocano. Pwede rin.
Para sa akin, and this is the kind of problem we're facing right now. First of all, sa tingin ko meron tayong participatory overload. You know, like many people are mobilizing, pero every group and every event is pointing in different directions. At parang meron tayong mindless speech hunt. Everyone is accusing each other. So, first of all, the problem we're facing is lack of moral ascendancy. On the one hand, yung Aquino administration, gusto niya ilagay sa, they want to call to account people that were supposedly involved in the Janet Napoles scam, but at the same time, their own moral ascendancy and legitimacy is under question because now they are allegedly also very involved in bribery through the DAP. The second problem I see is that yung mga tao na nagmobilize ngayon ay karamihan middle class. We see that the masses are not that much involved. And if you look at the Philippine middle class, medyo, because it has been quite marginalized and not politically active in the recent years, parang hindi pa sila masyadong well-organized. Hindi nila alam anong gusto nilang gawin. And as I said, what the Philippine is facing right now is very similar to what happened in Occupy movement in the United States, the Arab Spring countries, and what recently happened in Turkey and Brazil. You have a lot of mobilization, you have a lot of noise, pero what you have are post-ideological mobilizations where you don't have a clear leader, walang clear alternative, as Secretary Gonzales was talking about. Napaka-allergic ng mga middle-class mobilization ito sa mga organized groups, whether opposition groups, whether leftist groups. At saka, at the same time, they themselves, they're not unified sa anong gusto nila. Some just want prosecution of people who were allegedly involved in scams and corruption. Other people want the abolition of pork barrel, but they mean the legislative pork barrel. Some other people want the abolition of any kind of lump sum and discretionary funds. So in that sense, wala tayong isang parang clear platform tsaka yung discourse na ma-anchor natin ang mobilization natin and push for change. That's why sa tingin ko what we have right now is really an anarchy. It's an anarchy in terms of discourse, it's an anarchy in terms of mobilization, and in terms of anarchy, the ones that will always benefit are the most organized group. And I think the administration is still in a very strong position. They can keep on digging in. As Senator Tatad was saying, they have control within Senate, they have the control of course, with the Ombudsman, with the Supreme Court. So I think the possibility for any kind of major upheaval is really far from happening. And I think that's also the reason why, if you look at the assessment of Moody's and a lot of international financial institutions, they're saying that most likely the Philippine and the Aquino administration will weather the storm, and the Philippine economy will still be the shining and new bright spot in the Asia-Pacific region. So I think that's why President Aquino feels very confident saying that impeach me if you can. I have control over the state. Mobilizations are so messy. People don't seem to know what they want, and at the same time, the international committee seems to be backing me.
Richard, don't you think we're headed for a failed state? Because it seems our symbol is that of a headless chicken running circles, and our national symbol is boomerang.
Well, I wouldn't go as far as failed state. I mean, when you think about failed state, you're talking about countries like Somalia, perhaps, or modern-day Iraq. I think we're far from that kind of situation. But I think the problem we have right now is the possibility of, as you know, my colleague in Ateneo, Professor Benito Lim would say, is that baka ang gagawin natin dito will burn the house, you know, in the process of trying to revive our state institutions and making sure that we have good governance. Kasi kung titignan mo, on one hand, that the administration is going to file cases against perhaps 170 lawmakers and a lot of people. Then the opposition right now, in their varying forms and in different degrees, want to also file cases for impeachment against Aquino and other people who were involved in the misappropriation of DAP. So what we're going to have here is really, as I said, an anarchic situation, and I don't see really, clear resolution on the horizon. But sa tingin ko, and this is perhaps where I'm a little bit pessimistic, sa tingin ko is that what the government at least feeling, or at least people who are allegedly involved in this corruption scandal, is that, okay, hayaan mo na mga tao, manggugulo sila, they'll get noisy. Look at the rally last Friday. Wala naman tao at masyadong pumupunta doon. It seems this issue is losing traction, and eventually some new scandal and some other issues will come up and people will forget about it. So sa tingin ko, people who are involved in these corruption cases are very much hoping that as time moves forward, things will move towards their advantage, and the short-term memory of Filipinos will kick in again. And that's why I think we're not heading for a failed state. But what I'm fearing, as Secretary Gonzales is saying, is that baka rin wala rin magandang mangyari sa bansa natin. That we're just going to forget about this in the next 5 to 6 months and say that, those times, remember, we had good mobilizations all, and we came out naman, we expressed it, so at least now we can say that we did our obligation as citizens. Okay. I fear that we're moving towards that direction of demobilization and return of political apathy to the Philippines unless some clear alternative comes up, unless there's a clear leadership and a roadmap ahead. That's why it piqued my interest when Senator Tatad was talking about the complexities we face and perhaps the solutions that we can move forward with. And I hope we also can really find a clear alternative here in terms of leadership and platform.
Okay. Thank you, Professor. Senator Tatad, would you care to react to what he said? It appears that there's hope, kaya lang ang problema, we're running circles.
Well, I think I can agree basically with what Dr. Richards has said, no? How far are we, or how close are we to becoming a failed state? The original definition of a failed state involves the disintegration of the economy in most cases. No? We have a situation where the economic guys are telling us that people from outside are looking at the Philippines as the seat of the next economic miracle, quote unquote. But we have a political system that seems to be no longer able to hold the nation together. The level of public confidence is so low. You have really a non-functioning government. No? The level of competence is 0 or below 0. And the fact that so much crime has been exposed, and this remains unpunished crimes, and these are committed by the highest people in government, and there seems to be no way of punishing these people, supports the statement that there is a state of anarchy prevailing in the country. And that is the basic problem. So you have a situation of political collapse in the face of so-called economic good news. No? So the country will not sink like Iceland yet. But where are we headed? In my article today in the Standard, I'm saying what is to be done when the Constitution has ceased to function. And this is precisely the issue. The system of checks and balances, the separation of powers no longer exists because you have a president who has taken control of the 3 branches of government. Now, this amounts to a cessation of the operation of the Constitution. And as pointing out in my article, under the Constitution, even the declaration of martial law does not suspend the operation of the Constitution. That is clearly stated in the Constitution. But without declaring martial law, the operation of the Constitution, as far as the basic principles are concerned, has ceased to exist. So, without declaring anything, Pinoy has imposed something potentially more dangerous than martial rule in the country. This is the situation. No? Pero kung nakatutok lang tayo doon sa mga detalye about the pork barrel, we refuse to look at the big picture. Hindi natin nakikita yung problema ng bayan. Okay, burn the house. I think somewhere else in history, we heard some people say, we sometimes have to destroy in order to build.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Secretary Gonzales, would you care to react to what has been said about the country today? You know, you said something, wala pa naman hika yung mga indicators eh. But the problem is, may sintomas na. Yung ba sintomas na yan, lalala o masusumpo? Sapagkat ang isang factor daw po sa mga Pilipino, yung attention span sa mga controversial na balita, hanggang 2 linggo lang. Dahil sa natatabunan ng mga kwentong artista. Ano po ba yun, Secretary?
Hindi ako naniniwala na nakakalimot ang Pilipino. Especially our common people. Our common people are very pragmatic and shrewd in a way politically. When they see that nothing is going to happen anyway, they clam up. But it doesn't mean that the issues that they are facing ay nakalibing. Hindi. Nag-iintay lang yan ng pagsiklab. And then before you know it, they're all over the place. So, I think that as far as the foundation and elements of people power are concerned, it's there. So, this is really an open invitation to those who want to lead this nation. It's an indication. That's why people power element is there already, waiting, brewing, probably increasing. Then, let me just do a little bit of analysis on the condition of our politicians. Mm-hmm. I do not believe that they are silent because of money. I think what silenced the politicians today and in the past 3 years is the threat of being humiliated in public. I think somehow the present administration is number one in expertise of humiliating people, in trying to twist justice. I think they have shown that. And every thinking politician would have a second thought challenging this big machinery. It's a state PR machinery that you are facing. Then they can humiliate you. They can create a character. They can demonize you anytime. So I think this is the main reason why some politicians are not moving.
Or is it because these politicians also have skeletons in their closet?
Of course, that's what I mean. Yung skeleton na itatago yan before. Pero ngayon, meron tayong administrasyon na hindi lamang marunong maglabas ng skeleton, marunong pang mag-imbento ng skeleton. Yun ang nakakatakot eh. Yung ini-imbento yung skeleton, kaya pati yung mga walang skeleton, kinakabahan na rin. But I think there is a limit to that. And I think there is where hope is coming. No? I think, for example, ang ating mga obispo, biglang lumabas yung Pajero scandal. So, tahimik ang mga obispo. Kasi yung Pajero scandal, hindi totoo. And then, the state have shown that they can create skeletons and push it and ruin reputations of people. Kaya yung mga obispo medyo nag-backpedaling. Pero may hangganan yan. Naghihintayan. Ang mga politiko natin, ang nakita naman nila, tinanggap na namin yung bayad na ang ibig sabihin doon huwag mo na kaming galawin dahil tinatanggap na namin, suko na kami sa iyo. Binigyan na ng pera, tapos in-expose pa. Yun ang mas malaking krimen. I think our politicians now are thinking, pumayag na nga kaming huwag kumibo para hindi ilabas ang skeleton ninyo dahil inilabas yung skeleton namin. Alam mo, betrayal among thieves ang pinakamasakit sa lahat. So, ayan, lalabas yan. Pagka pumutok na yan, I think, magsisimula na ang hangganan. And then, para naman sana wag gumulo ang bansa, I'm appealing to men and women of goodwill. Dito sa grupo na to, may mga kilala ako dito na pwedeng magsama-sama at magbuo ng isang tunay na transition. I-transform natin ang ating bansa. Sabi nga ni Kit, we need to transform this nation. Tayong medyo mga uugod-ugod na at wala nang hinahangad sa buhay, kundi palagay ko magbigay na lang ng mabuti sa bansa. Kailangan magsama-sama at bigyan na natin ng liderato itong nabubuong bagyo sa Pilipinas.
Thank you very much. We will open the floor to questions. First question.
Alam mo naman, hindi ako nagtatanong masyado. Pero and the last time, there was a guest here whom I did not respect. I sat at the back because I would not communicate with people I do not respect. That was Brillantes of Comelec, of course. Okay. Kasi ang isang attitude lang sa ganyang walang hiya, sigawan. Ayaw ka naman maasira ang forum mo. But I think...
Malaking utang na loob yan.
Salamat. The truth shall set us free. The truth partially comes out every time we have this turmoil. But we always have to go back to the whole truth. So, people power is a fraud, whether in Egypt, Philippines, or other countries, as it is today in the past 10 years. The exposition, of course, of Bert left out one very important element in these changes, and which is the U.S. You go back to Marcos, solar cells, cut cleanly. Was it solar or Reagan? You got to Edsa Dos, Mirant, and other U.S. businesses right behind, and they entered the picture right after Iraq fell. And Gloria restored sovereign guarantee. When the honeymoon of Gloria with the Americans was over, the Hayop 10 came out. All the American boys started going against Gloria when they were installed also in the cabinet by Gloria. Let us admit that fact. We are a failed state not because we do not have a functioning government. We have a colonial government. That is the meaning of a state. Sovereignty, we do not have that. And that is getting worse again with Penoy there, inviting the U.S. back in and so on. So, mahabang usapan yan, nakahawak na ng mikropono, ipopokpok na sa akin ni Melo dahil
Di naman.
hindi nagtatanong, ako yung nag-exposition din. But we have been asking questions for 40 years. Ano? No, we just must make statements. Number 2, the politicians cannot defeat a politician in power in Malacanang because they are all the same. Ano? I have not accepted a government job since 1991. And I have been impoverished by that. I used to drive at least 2 newest model cars. I now drive a 14-year-old Corolla. What is the point of my saying that? You understand only the real spirit of what has to be done here when you share in that poverty. When you will reject because you know it's a fraud, yung Moody's ratings. The Moody's ratings et al., I want to name them, Standard & Poor and so on, they serve American and banking interests. That's all. But we keep repeating and repeating that myth. So that confuses the people. So again, we have a movement now, yung identified nga the PR campaign of Penoy, but American and international PR groups are there working behind these anti-pork movements that want to limit it to a campaign against the opposition lang. But we manage some forces, help, with credit due to the Bayan Muna group and to Tandem in making this boomerang against the administration because the administration is a political character, a personality na maduminin yan. So, well, thanks to Jinggoy, he exposed the fire, the forest fire. He did not start the fire, and he did not say that he is not on fire. That is honesty. That is the truth. Let the courts decide that. But with our courts appointed by the same dirty politicians, we don't expect anything from that.
Okay.
Fundamental point. We're going to talk about democracy. What kind of farce? At age 62, I will not accept that anymore. We need a period of dictatorship under non-politicians, revolutionaries, not violent, not Mao Zedong type. By being truthful and honest is revolutionary enough. And don't tell me the church is revolutionary. Because the church was part of EDSA II. There were those who opposed what happened. But Sok Villegas, for example, was hunting us down. God damn it.
Easy.
Easy.
Anyway, sige. All right. Thank you. Okay. Noted, sir. Noted. All right. Nadagdagan yung issue natin. Kaberting, paano ngayon yan? Senator Kip? Yes.
Just let me react. No? It is not possible to disagree with the points Mentong has made. No? But politics is really a complicated game. I mean, I do not believe we have had any presidential election in this country that did not invite the participation of foreign powers. Probably Marcos in the beginning won, Estrada won, without any foreign intervention. But take note that these two presidents were booted out of power. So this is the global situation. You have a world power that tries to intervene in everything that the smaller guys try to do. And in our situation, when Pew Research Center tells us that the Filipinos are the first admirers of the United States. 85% of those interviewed really love the United States. Israel is only number 2. Then we really have a very serious problem, Mentong. No? So we really need true Filipino nationalism to guide the the future of this country. We've had so-called nationalists before, even anti-American communists before. But scratch them below the surface and they turn out to be foreign plants. Also, no? Nabisto natin. Kunyari lang pala. On the more fundamental issues like reproductive health, sa Amerika sila kumukuha ng guidance. What is involved there is already the soul of the individual. Pero nandun pa rin sila. But I think there are a few things that we can do. Okay, the credit ratings agencies. They need to be upgraded themselves. Sila muna ang dapat i-upgrade. Kasi as the Wall Street collapse showed, they really performed very badly before and during the crisis. Pero tinatanggap natin, tama si Mantok. But ang problema dyan, these things are propagated through the mass media, controlled also by them, and by interest allied with them. No? Not only the ratings agencies, the so-called polling agencies in this country. Puro naman falsifikado yan eh. Especially during elections, binibili talaga ng marami. And again, the media endorses uncritically the so-called surveys kahit na walang verification if the surveys were conducted or not. If conducted, honest ba ang the process, no? And then the reading of the results is always, halimbawa, meron kang 600 samples or even 1,200 samples, and X% of the sample said this thing. When the results are reported, ang sabi, X% of the entire nation. Hindi na yung X% of 600 or X% of 1,200, kundi X% of 99 million Filipinos. Ayan ang pinakakain sa atin ng media, and people repeat it, especially those who stand to benefit from repeating the myths. So, we'll have to do allotment. Ang problema lang natin, we are towards our sunset years. So we have to make sure that our grandchildren are nursed on the correct values and they are educated properly para lumakas sila mga totoong Pilipino. Na ang problema sa atin, our diplomats from the very beginning, pag pinuri ng puti sa negotiating table, nakakalimutan yung interest nila. At ang interest ng kabila, yun ang pinaglalaban. Okay. So all you need is a short paragraph praising the Filipino diplomat. Tapos na ang istorya. Diba?
And that's the end of it.
That's the end of it. So, yun. Real, authentic Filipino patriotism and nationalism, yun ang kailangan natin ngayon. Okay. Now, the young are predominant these days. No? So, they talk derisively of the seniors. Tanda na yan, walang silbihan. No. You will need the experience and the wisdom of the old to guide the young. Kasi yung mga bata ngayon, with all due respect, ang nasususo niyan, all the values from outside na puro mali, countercultural sa Pilipinas, pero yun ang pumapasok dito.
Okay. Maliwanag po. Matanong ko naman si Mr. Garcia mula sa grupo ng mga magsasaka. Pag natapos ba yung issue nyo sa Hacienda Luisita, mananahimik na kayo?
Bago ko muna po sagutin na bali, idudugtong ko lang sa kasalukuyan nangyayari sa Hacienda Luisita kaninang sinabi ko.
Sige po.
Yung bago na ipatupad yung tambiolo, yung pamamahagi ng lupa, sa kasalukuyan po meron pong kinakamkong lupain sa loob ng Hacienda na sa Barangay Balite, 100 hektarya, sa Barangay Kutkut, 100 hektarya. Ganon din ay meron din kaming datos na ang Barangay Mapalaksyaw, Barangay Bantog, Asturias, ay meron din kakamkamin na lupain ng Tadeco at sa barangay Mapalaksyaw. Ang mismong si Kuwangko mismo, siyang nagpupunta ron at tinuturo na yun ay gagawing isang playground circle na mula doon sa malapit sa Esitex hanggang dito sa buong kabuuan ng barangay Mapalaksyaw. Kaya yung pamamahagi po ng lupa ay malaking katanungan sa amin bakit sinasabi nila na ayos na ang pamamahagi ng lupa. Gayon, may mga tinapyas pa siya. Kung atin pong matatandaan, yung kautusan ng Korte Suprema na dapat ay ibalik sa amin yung 4,915 hektarya. Ngunit yung ginawa ng DAR, imbis na ibalik po sa amin at sinabi na sa kautusan na dapat hanapin pa niya yung 1,000 hektarya na dapat ibigay sa amin, ay hindi niya ginawa bagkus tinapyas pa niya yung mga lupain.
Talagang malupit pala, maantak pala yung inyong karanasan. Ano?
Opo.
Kaya ko kasi naitanong yan, sa hanay kasi na magsasaka, pag natapos na yung issue at nagwagi na, limot na yung mga kasama. Ibig ko sabihin baka dumating yung pagkakataon, okay na kayo, kayo mismo mag-away-away. Hindi naman mangyayari sa inyo yan. Ano nakatingin na?
Kung sa tingin po namin ay magiging patas po yung pamamahagi ng lupa sa amin, sa hanay po namin mga magsasaka, kung yan ay may mababahagi sa amin, pagyayamanin po namin yan. At kahit sabihin na natin nagtagumpay na kami, siyempre magiging mapagbantay kami dahil marami po mga ginagawang pagmamaniobra yung ating gobyerno para lang hindi maibigay talaga sa amin yung pamamahagi ng lupa. Katulad po sa pinapipirma nilang APU na kung saan ang nilalaman po nun ay 30 years na babayaran ng mga manggagawang bukid yung amortisasyon. At kung hindi mo ito mapagyayaman, sa loob ng 3 taon, ay pwedeng bawiin ng Department of Agrarian Reform yung lupain namin.
Okay. Maraming salamat po. Kaberting, yung tungkol doon sa iba't ibang sektor na may problema sa ating bansa, Secretary Gonzales, masyadong parokyal yung mga issue na kinakaharap, katulad ng magsasaka, issue sa Hacienda, yung issue sa pangisdaan, issue sa kung saan-saan. Wala bang maglalagom nito para at least may isang agenda ang bibigay sa presidente para malaman ng presidente kung ano kinakaharap niya?
Medyo mahirap gawin sa kasalukuyan yan kasi namimili ang gobyerno natin kung sinong kakausapin. Kung hindi ka kakampi, hindi ka kakausapin. Ang problema, marami siyang hindi kakampi Kaya ang mga yan ay nananahimik. Kaya medyo hindi magandang ang panahon para gawin yan. Siguro pagdating ng susunod na gobyerno, importante na ang mga sektor ay mabuo at ay naniniwala naman ako na talagang gusto ng mga sektor na magkaisa. Pero meron tayong isang pamahalaan na hindi binibigyan ng pabor yan. Kaya tingin ko, mag-iintay yan.
Being a former National Security Advisor to the previous administration, anong tingin niyo sa nangyari sa Zamboanga?
Well, ang tingin ko sa Zamboanga parang misencounter. Ika nga ay bakbakang parang hindi sinasadya. Dahil kilala naman natin yung mix ang signal na nakukuha natin sa Zamboanga. Yung isang istorya, yun ay nanggagaling sa Davao. Kasi nagpunta rin yung MNLF sa Davao Nagroon din sila ng rally sa plaza doon. Ang ginawa ng mayor ng Davao, sabi niya, sige, itaas niyo yung bandila niyo kung gusto niyo. Basta wag lang tataas sa bandila ng Pilipinas. So, pwede yung itaas, basta mababa ng konti sa Pilipinas. Yun ang sinabi ni Duterte at wala namang nangyari sa Davao. Ngayon, may mga nagsasabi, lalo na yung mga na-captured elements ng puwersa ni Normi Suare, na nagsasabi na ang imbitasyon sa kanila ay para magmarcha at magtaas ng bandila somewhere. So, yung elemento ng kwento galing sa Davao, parang totoo. At the same time, when you look at the actual na nangyari sa Zamboanga, may makikita mo naman na there is a premeditated aspect of it. For example, the storage of weapons, storage of ammunition, and the storage of food. So, may plano. Ibig sabihin, premeditated din yan. So, it's probably a mix of the two. But what is important here, I think, sinimulang questionin ng gobyerno kung sino ang nagpondo nito. I think that question is very important. Very, very important to study that. Because this is where the point of mentum will come in. We have a very weak government. And this is known not only to us, but to all our neighbors, the whole family of nations know how weak we are today. So pwede tayong laruin. Unfortunately, there are certain issues na medyo masasabi natin sa kapag ka-amateur ng ating pamahalaan, medyo nagkamali ng reaksyon. Binastos natin ng mga inchik, inatake natin ng Saba, hindi tayo nagustuhan ng mga Cambodians, etc., etc. And there are many issues around our neighbors. And it is very, very tempting to play around with us or maybe shame our president because we're so weak. So, dapat pag-aralan ng mabuti who is really behind the Zamboanga episode. Kasi tinitingnan ko, nakatira ako napasama ako sa mga tausugin. So, what happened in Zamboanga is tragic and extremely unfortunate.
Okay. So, most likely sa pagsusuri ninyo, saan galing yung pondo? Saan galing yung inspirasyon?
Mapapatrouble ako, mga kaibigan ko yung iba dyan eh. Pero ang ibig ko lang, hindi galing sa akin definitely. Hindi naman sa naghuhugas kamay ako. No? Pero sana naman irespeto ako ng aking mga kaibigan. Hindi ako pumapasok sa mga ganong adventure. No? May mga pinapasukan tayong radikal. Pero hindi yung mga ganyang bagay. Ang masasabi ko lang, ina-advise yung ating pamahalaan because it's very serious. Very, very serious. It will affect some of our policies and it could be irreversible in the future. Ang ating external defense. Hindi pa tapos yan. Hindi pa tapos ang bakbakan dyan. In fact, marami pang nahandyan kung titignan nyo talaga. Ewan ko, talaga ang galing ng ating, ano yung sinasabi nila tungkol sa media, ang PR, tapos na. Pero may umuwi na bang mga refugees? Yung ating mga kababayan, bumalik na ba sa bahay na? May babalikan ba sila?
Nakita ko yun.
Huminto na ba ang bakbakan? Ang nalalaman ko, may mga 100 pa sa loob. At tuloy ang logistical support. So, hindi pa matatapos yan soon. Kawawa ang armed forces natin. Kasi lumalaban sila sa isang gera na maaring hindi nila kagustuhan.
Secretary, mula sa ibang bansa yung suporta?
Palagay ko external ang support.
Saan kaya? Sa kanluran? Sa Timo?
Tama na yun. Hanggang doon na lang. Hanapin nyo na lang. Kaya pakinggan nyo si Mentong. Kasi, dalawa ang suspicions ko dito eh. Dalawa yan.
Ano po yan?
Ay, tanungin nyo si Mentong, alam niya na yung isa.
Okay, Senator.
Gusto ko lang dagdagan yung sinabi ni Bert. Ang isang katanungan na tila hindi pa nasasagot, was all that killing necessary? Ilan bang namatay?
202 as of the other week. I was there.
Kailangan bang namatay lahat yan? Kasi kung babasahin natin yung mga ulat galing po sa Mindanao, there was a chance to have a ceasefire on the 5th day. Nag-umpisa yung incursion ng September 9. On the 5th day, September 13, dumating si Presidente Aquino roon. Nagpakita. Nandun siya. Pagkatapos, nung araw na yon, nagkaroon ng feeler, di umano, galing kay Javier Malik, pinadaan sa isang pare na Paris Priest ng Lustre, Santa Catalina. No? Proposing a ceasefire. Ang hinihingi lamang, bigyan ng pagkakataon na makaalis yung mga puwersa na nandoon. Okay. At kung may mga sugatan, kailangan siguro ambulansya to accompany the wounded. No? Okay. Hindi tinanggap yun. 12 years before that, may similar incident doon Kabatangan, also in Zamboanga, na pumayag sila at naiwasan yung patayan. Okay. Ngayon, ilang tropa ang dinala ron? 11,000 troops. 5 battalions from outside. No? Meron ng 2 kampo ron na may 3,000 each. Standard niya, 3,000 each. So may 6,000. Kung 5 battalions, 1,000 each, di 11,000 yan ang dinala doon. Ngayon, ang kalaban, ilan? 400 or so. Ill-equipped in spite of the fact, sinasabi ni Bert na merong arms na store beforehand. No? So, kung nagawa sa Davao na iwasan yung problema, kasi ang pakay daw nila doon is just to raise the flag. Okay? That's a political act na dapat siguro hindi rin payagan, pero ang kailangan ba yung reaction, yung mortar bombardment kagad? Palagay ko mali. Ngayon, bakit nagkamali? Nandun yung commander-in-chief na hindi nakita for so long, during the 9 days na nandun siya, 2 beses lang siya nakita. To the point na maraming spekulasyon na siya naglalaro ng drones o kaya bumalik sa Maynila na hindi nagpakita, whatever. Maraming spekulasyon, no? Dahil sa hindi siya nakita. Ang commander on the ground was someone who had no business being there. Si Mar Rojas. This was a military operation already. Oh. Dapat yung theater commander, si General Ardo, at the very least siya, o kaya yung chief of staff kung kailangan. Siya ang nandun. Pero hindi nakita natin mga general. Hindi natin nakita. Sa mga press conferences, kahit na nandun si Gasmin, nagsasalata si Mar Rojas. Ano ba ang conflict ang minanage na ni Mar? Military or civil or even domestic na na pwedeng mag-qualify sa kanya as commander. Ayan na nangyari. So, the entire 11,000 troop strength receiving command from Mar Rojas. Hindi na, isang kabalinto na napakalaki. Ngayon, nag-announce sila ng mission accomplished. No? Crisis over. On the very moment they were announcing this, Mar Rojas was the one speaking, si Gasmin nakikinig lang. Magputukan, 4 na sundalo, ang nasugatan, 1 namatay. Crisis over. Okay. Pero yung curfew, yung 8 to 5 curfew, nanatili doon. At the 11,000 troops, nandun. Pero maraming namatay, si Javier Malik, nakaalpas, nakatakas, pero they achieved something. Na-unify nila yung Moro nation in favor of independence. So, hindi natapos ang problema. Nag-umpisa ang mas malaking problema. Now, mayroon pa silang demanda kay Nor for declaring independence ay lalo na nasindihan yung apoy. Nadagdagan yung apoy of independence. Okay. So, magpapatuloy yung
Senator Tatad, you mean to say that while plunder cases are going on in Manila, there is a big blunder case in Zamboanga?
Yeah, yung blunder napakalaki. Plunder and blunder, tama ka, no? Magandang
baka kasi, dahil nobody gets sued for blunder. For plunder, yes. Napakalaki. Okay. Yeah. Salamat po. Professor.
Yes, very quickly, let me respond to the issue of the Moody's. Now, I raised that not because I say that what they're saying is correct. What I'm saying is that polls have a conditioning effect. If polls keep on saying that someone is popular and all, you'll get an element of immunity from pressure domestically and internationally. And Aquino has been benefiting from that, and that perhaps explains why he's quite hubristic. But if you look at the cases like Turkey, like Prime Minister Erdogan, he has been very, very popular for years. And now suddenly, all of that popularity parang wala siya. Because he just pushed his personal hubris to the brink. And eventually, people couldn't take it anymore. So, in that case, Aquino is not immune to a popular upheaval, if that's how we want to put it. Now, going back to the issue of Mindanao, my point is that without going into the conspiracy theories of who's perhaps behind it, let me just put it this way. I feel that the entire crisis laid bare the fact that, to begin with, the Aquino strategy of only focusing on the MNLF to resolve the crisis in Mindanao was inherently problematic. because it was not inclusive enough and it didn't put all important stakeholders on the table.
So you mean they focus so much on the MILF?
They focus so much on the MILF that they ignored other important elements such as MLF, with whom they had earlier agreements before even the MILF came into being. After all, MILF is the child or a splinter faction of MNLF. And the thing is this, there were a lot of indicators before this crisis came to bear, and it says a lot about the intelligence failure of the government. First, you have the Sabah crisis, Nurmi Suarez coming out, supporting the agent saboteurs. Then later on, he gives a very important interview to Al Jazeera, and he says that he feels very angry, he feels very betrayed, and he feels that the government is not fulfilling their earlier commitments to the MNLF. And then, few weeks before the coordinated attack on Zamboanga, whether it was coordinated or a mixture of coordinated and misunderstanding, the fact of the matter was that they had this declaration of independence and all of these provocative activities. So they should have been put under surveillance, and the government should have made sure that these possible spoilers would not, go to the desperate measure of provoking a crisis in order to get the attention of people. And now we're even in a worse situation compared to a few months back. Because with filing case against the Misuari, you're basically declaring war on the MNLF, and at the same time, the whole Zamboanga crisis has encouraged other radical elements, Abu Sayyaf and whatnot, to see that this is a government that we can easily, have games with. And they're not that credible enough in pushing back and deterring crisis. So what I feel is that we have pushed back the resolution of the Mindanao crisis years and years back. And this is the long-term political fallout of what's happening in Zamboanga, in addition to the humanitarian crisis and the leadership question that it has raised.
Thank you.
Question. I'll ask the panelists to factor in the issue of Sabah and its special relationship with the Tausog, which is MNLF, because it's probably far deeper than just what I feel I've heard so far. And is it part of Malaysia's strategy that the MNLF is isolated, and the Philippine government has been catering to the MI, because one factor there is the MI will not be as hard as the MN in retaining rights over Sabah.
Would care to react, Professor or Secretary Gonzales?
Well, before I address what has been raised, I feel this is important. The employment of force is normally done at the very last. It cannot. That is why the right to employ force should not be given to irresponsible leaders. Because you have to be very responsible and very, you have to evaluate all. So may I say that I don't think there is intelligence failure in Zamboanga. The military knew all movements of non-military forces. No, the intelligence community, I think, is expecting a template. There is a template on Nur. So they're expecting that it's the template that will be followed, except that the new leadership did not want to follow the template, irresponsibly ordering an all-out war, which is not the template when it comes to Nur Miswari and the MNLF. To me, this is very, very important. I want to emphasize the fact that, for the nation, we have an armed forces that is loyal and will always follow orders. Let us not misuse it. I think the armed forces was misused in Zamboanga. Now, to the question, itong kaibigan natin lagi nagre-raise ng issue na ayaw ko sagutin. But those questions are important and very relevant at this time. To me, when you analyze what happened in Zamboanga, then you must go back a little bit of history. President Marcos wanted to push further the issue of Sabah. So he created a force that will destabilize Sabah so that we can have a better positioning in terms of negotiation of the future. But na-discovery yung Jabida and therefore hindi natuloy yung invasion. Anong naging reaction ng Malaysia to that? They supported, it's a proxy war that they did. They supported the MNLF, created the MNLF, expanded it on the theory that yung trouble nasa atin, wala sa kanila. And then suddenly, ako, the Sultan of Sulu is a friend of mine, but up to now, he has not given me a clear explanation as to why he invaded Sabah. So I do not know why, but it happened. So now we invaded Sabah, so the trouble is now in Sabah. If you go by historical parallelism, so ano ngayon ang gagawin ng Malaysia? Ipoproxy ulit, di ba? Pero ang maganda dito Normiswari hates the Malaysians. He hates them because inaresto siya, napahiya siya, di ba? So, walang magdududa na si Normiswari tatanggap ng pera sa Malaysians. But my question is, ganun bang kasimple lang yun? Ang dali-dali namang umembento ng isang Malayo, ng isang Arabo, isang British. Ang kumakalat na chismis ngayon sa Lanao, ang sinasabi ng mga MNLF, because there is a buying spree in Lanao at the moment. Lahat ng baril binibili sa Lanao. Nag-iipon yung mga MNLF. At pag tinatanong, saan ang galing ang pera nyo? Sabi niya, mga British ang mga nagpupondo sa amin. That's what they say. So, where the money is coming from really, I am almost certain it's external. Who? Si Mentong, maraming kandidato dyan.
Secretary, may binanggit kasing pangalan, Xavier Daniels, na umikot umano. At ayon kay Professor Wadi, totoo yon at umikot sa hulo, nag-recruit, pero escorted raw ng sundalong Amerikano, according to Xavier Daniels. Dinis-own siya ng United Nations. Would you have any idea who this guy is?
Well, tanungin nyo na lang si Mentong dyan. Mas accurate siguro magiging reading niya. But what I want to tell you is this. Any foreigner na umikot sa Sulu, alam nyo, ang mga tausog, kasama na si Nur dyan, they tend to dagdagan yung kwento. Yung mga walang importanteng tao, ginagawa nilang importante. Sanay sila sa kanyan. So, we can't really just pick up stories when you hear them, no? So, ang tinitingnan ko dyan, may naglalaro talaga kay Normiswari. Kasi if I were an operator internationally, si Normiswari is a very, very good subject.
Okay. Would you care to react, Professor Heydarian, to all that's been said?
I think Mahathir himself admitted that Malaysia supported them in the left. So I think the issue of Malaysian lack of constructive interest in this issue is quite established. But on whether, I agree with Secretary Gonzales that whether Miswari would be willing to make deals with Malaysia and move forward, I really doubt it. My personal position, although, of course, Secretary Gonzales perhaps has more information than me, is that I feel that this was almost a desperate attempt to show that the MNLF is still a force to reckon with, that they're important, that they're a stakeholder, that they should be dealt with. And remember, for Muslim people, the notion of honor and respect is extremely important. And I feel they felt really disrespected by the Aquino administration. Beginning from the October Framework Agreement signing on, all of this scandal about the president even lost a letter from the Sultanate of Sulu, all of this ignoring against Miswari. Just remember, the culture of the Muslim people, especially Moro people, is very honorific. So I feel they felt that this is a desperate measure. They kept on giving chances to the government to come up with a dialogue, with a platform for them, and they kept on failing and ignoring them. And here we are dragged into a constant cycle of escalation, which unfortunately ended in the Zamboanga crisis. What I'm very curious about is what will be the government's next game plan, because obviously its current game plan is not going to work anymore. A peace plan which only focuses on the MILF is no longer going to work in light of the fact that we already have this crisis on our hand. So what kind of remedies the government will introduce is something that I'm very much looking forward to.
Thank you very much. We have a question from a columnist of opinion, Mr. Lingoy Alcuaz. Lingoy?
Magandang umaga po para kay Secretary Gonzales and maybe Professor Heydarian. Kung pwede po tayong bumalik sa kasaysayan, out of curiosity, I was just wondering, kasi sa ngayon, highlighted yung pagkahiwalay ng MNLF, MILF, BIFF, Abu Sayyaf, etc. Pero nung 1972, 73, 74, nagkaroon ng tatlong major escalation sa panig ng mga Moro rebels. Noong pong October 1972 sa Marawi, Lanao del Sur, noong March 1973 sa Cotabato, at noong if I'm not mistaken, February or March of 1974 sa Polo. Okay. Yang tatlong major escalation at that time, kasi ang perception noon parang monolithic yung MNLF, no? At parang siguro sa image nung Nur Miswari na UP professor, parang na transcend yung mga tribal boundaries or differences, no? So baka na intindihan nyo kung ano ang sitwasyon noon, dahil noon po ang question ko, bakit hindi na isagawa ng MNLF na sabay-sabay ang pag-aalsa sa Lanao del Sur, Cotabato at Jolo? No? On the other hand, still, considering na sa tingin ko, yun naman pong MNLF, may pagka-NPA rin na nung nagdeklara na martial law si Marcos, napakaliit nung NPA at siya na rin ang nagpalaki. So in a sense, although siguro yung MNLF was much bigger in terms of manpower than the NPA, ganun na rin yung MNLF na nung nagdeklara ng martial law, hindi naman ganun kalaki yung MNLF, ngunit yung deklarasyon ng martial law at yung ng militar, yun po ang nagpalaki sa MNLF. No? Of course, ang isang malaking kaibahan, yung CPP-NPA, yung pong financier noon, yung supplier, yung People's Republic of China ay medyo malayo, at yung financier, hindi lang financier, no? Kundi financier, trainer, at maybe organizer, at baka nagbibigay ng strategic and tactical direction ay yung Malaysia na napakalapit. Pwede po kayong magpaliwanag ng konti kung ano ang sitwasyon noon compared sa ngayon?
Well, palagay ko, nagsimula ng gulo sa South is really the MNLF minus the Malaysians. But when the Malaysians saw the unfolding events, they decided to take advantage of it. Hindi lumaki yung MNLF until after the 2 or 3 batches coming from Malaysia. Kasi what they did was to recruit about 400 and train them in Malaysia. So, yun ang nagbigay ng parang nationwide or nabuo talaga yung tatlong tribo nung bumalik na yung mga trainees from Malaysia. Hindi naman dapat na itago ito kasi ina-admit na ito ng Malaysia ngayon. So, ang nangyari lang, ang una, may kanya-kanyang leadership kasi yung tatlong tribo eh. Kaya parang hiwalay-hiwalay. But what they have is unity of purpose. They may not have unity of leadership, but they have unity of purpose. At ang namayani lang si Nur Miswari because Nur Miswari went to Tripoli, was able to get financing, and therefore, he who holds the gold rules. Kaya, si Nur Miswari ang naging chairman ng MNLF. Yung MILF naman is, I think, an official government operation. Talagang in-split ang MNLF. That's why you have an MILF.
Pero meron ng tatlong grupo rin doon sa MNLF eh. May SEMA na eh. So, paano yun?
Alam mo, ngayon na lang yan. Yung mga karamihan sa mga batch, even the forces of Nur Miswari now, as what they referred to as batch 1986. Batch 86, yung mga MNLF na sumali lang sa MNLF noong wala ng gera. So, karamihan dyan. So, you see, it's so easy sana to address the MNLF kasi they are not the same MNLF that we used to know. Plus, there are no external support to the MNLF until lately. No? dati wala nang external yan because the Malaysians, I remember very well because I am the one who met with Mahathir. Sabi niya, let's clean up our mess together. That's the policy of the negotiation really is, let's clean up our mess together. Sabi ko, yes, we agree. So, ang natitira noon, kasi may agreement sa MNLF, kaya kinausap ang MILF. But the real, yung pinagkasundoan na policy, is that the negotiation should really be between the MNLF and the MILF with the government as broker. Kasi you will be giving the same territory, the same autonomous region. So, yun ang hindi nasunod for one reason or another. What we were insisting in the beginning, ang negotiation dapat between the MN and the MI. But the MI refuses to talk to Norberto because sabi niya, meron ng executive council why should we talk to Norberto? Our fault is there should have been parallel negotiation, MN Miswari and MI, MN Executive Council and MI, those things, all those kinds of negotiations should have taken place, but it didn't happen. So, ganun yan.
All right. Yes, Professor.
Yeah, I just want to put a very small input na as a student politics, someone who has really studied peace negotiation across the world, if you look at it always, you look at insurgency groups, revolutionary groups, first are unified by a common ideology and purpose, as Secretary Gonzales was saying. But as the war drags on and it becomes a grinding one, tactical consideration will create more and more splits. I mean, just look at Syria, what a mess it is. Hundreds of opposition groups. Same thing has happened here, and definitely the MNLF is not a monolithic group. That's why people are talking about the Miswari faction of the MNLF. So first, you have the 1976 Tripoli Agreement creating splits within the MNLF. Then you have the MILF coming out later on. But later on, when the MNLF took the responsibility of governance and Miswari became the government of ARMM, that's where, again, new splits created. There were new factions within MNLF. So basically, there are two things that create splits within a group. First is peace agreements after a grinding war. And second, when insurgent groups or some factions take over the real responsibility of government and somehow failed at it. And those both things happen in the case of MNLF. And I'm not surprised why this group is keep on splitting and splitting and splitting. And that's one of the major dilemma for the Philippine government. Do we have a credible, unified counterpart to really negotiate with? I think after the Zamboanga crisis, you can expect even more split. Remember, during the Zamboanga crisis, you had other attacks by, Abu Sayyaf against Basilan. So you had other people joining the parties, like anarchists and troublemakers joining party. So in that case, we're dealing with a configuration of peace agreements and a complexity of peace negotiations, which was worse than before. And that's where I say, perhaps, yes, it was not an intelligence failure, but I think the government could have better acted upon available intelligence and available assessment of how the Miswari faction perhaps calculates, acts, etc., etc.
Thank you. Ligoy.
Brief follow-up para kay Secretary Gonzales. Nung panahon nung 1972 to 75, if I'm not mistaken, yung pong administrasyon sa Sabah under Tun Mustafa ay hindi bahagi ng UMNO. At sila po ay parang opposition, although regional opposition. So itong intervention ng Malaysia, paano po ang naging dynamics na ang base, natural yung malapit sa Pilipinas ay Sabah, no? Ay opposition o hindi kasama ng UMNO, ng Federal Administration, sila ba ay nagko-cooperate o sila ba ay magkahiwalay?
Noong panahon na yon, ang liderato ng Sabah, mga kamag-anak ng Tausug. So, if ever there is cooperation between the Sabah Authority and MNLF, it is because of magkamag-anak. But I know for a fact that the MNLF is a federal operation. Federal government yung operation na yun. So, I think lang, can I add a few things about the issue? Kasi si Prof is mentioning about what causes the split. During our watch, what we were watching for is what can cause unity. Because ang naging approach ng previous administration is to split really the MNLF. Natural yan sa bakbakan you split the forces. But what can unite them is our primary concern during our time. And there are two issues. One is religious. That is why we make it a point and making sure all the time, and we exerted a lot of effort on this, to make sure that the fight between MN, MI, and all factions of the Moros versus the government does not become a religious one. That's very important. I don't know if the government is aware that they should not allow this to become a religious war because the consequence will be disastrous. Number two is really incidents. Incidents like in the case of the MNLF before, the incident was the Javida massacre. Ang worry ko ngayon, maybe unintentionally, government may have created a new issue that have united the Moros, and that is the Zamboanga episode. Perhaps you have seen the headline picture ng Philippine Star when you showed a Tausug blindfolded and tied on his back. That is the height of humiliation for a Tausug warrior. When we played on television na naka-hog-tied lahat yung mga prisoners, ginaganyan-ganyan natin. You know, those are images, I think, non-ideological. But I think may have united the Moros. Nung simula, minomonitor ko yung mga text messages ng aking mga kaibigan, all tribes, no? Lahat yan, minumura si Norberto. Minumura si Norberto lang yan. Bakit na sinubo na naman tayo, ganyan-ganyan. But as the fighting progresses, nagbabago yan eh. Ang lumalabas na ngayon are legendary stories. Heroism of Malik, pagbibihis ng puti, you know, martyrdom. Ganyan ang lumalabas. At ngayon, ang balita ko, iba na usapan ngayon. I think the government have successfully united the Moros.
Yes, Tess.
Thank you for that, Secretary Gonzales, and that's the reason why I'm going to raise the question. If the government has succeeded in unifying the Muslims because of several images that are being projected in media, what's your take now on the civilians, the faith communities that are caught in the crossfire of all these images and all these political maneuverings? Kasi ang nakikita ko po, during your watch, I think, kung tama yung aking perception at saka yung observation kahit noon, may papel na ginampanan yung peace processes, which right now would be the Office of the President Affairs and Peace Process. Ano ngayon ang take ninyo tungkol doon na mga civilians, mga tao, mga faith communities, mga ulamas, mga bishops na pinipilit na huwag maging religious conflict, na huwag maging cultural and ideological conflict, pero are caught in the crossfire. And at the same time, punong-puno na ng bigat because they have to feed, to house, to keep healthy all sides.
Well, you know, our approach then was preventive, no? Itong ginagawa natin ngayon, hindi preventive ito after the fact. No? After the fact na to eh. Kaya sabi ko nga, hindi dapat nilalaro ang gera eh. Hindi pinaglalaroan ang gera to begin with, no? Eh, mukhang exciting na game itong gera eh. Sa pananaw ng ilan sa gobyerno. Kaya pinabayaan at itinodo pa. Ang gera ginagamit lang kung sa tingin natin ito ay if it will end a particular issue. Fighting Malik in Zamboanga will not end Norberto. It will not end the issue of conflict in Mindanao. Kaya dapat hindi ginagamit yan. Hindi baling magmukhang tanga na tayo sa gobyerno paminsan-minsan, huwag lang natin ituloy sa violence. No? Pagka-violence na kasi, mahirap nang i-cure yung mga effects niyan eh. Ngayon, pangalawa, yung sinasabi mo na peace process. Make a partner ang peace process nung panahon namin. The partner is the Bishop Ulama Conference, wherein we attempted, kahit na alam mo yung mga pare, mga obispo, protestante o katoliko, pati ang mga ulama, hindi mo nang basta-basta bibigyan ng pera yan eh. Hindi lang pera yan eh. They have to believe. Kaya mahirap pa nga kung paano namin natulungan yan eh. It's another operation. But You see, we truly encourage the Bishop Ulama Conference in Mindanao. Diferensya, nung pag-upo ni Pinoy, binuwag ka agad ang Bishops Ulama Conference kasi ang tingin ni Pinoy sa mga obispo, mga tao ni GMA. At yung mga ulama, tao ni GMA. Kaya anong ginawa? Initsapuera yan. Initsapuera ang isang institution that could really be very, very essential to the peace process in Mindanao. More than the peace process office of Malacanang. The more important factor in the peace in Mindanao was the Bishop Ulama Conference. It is crucial. But that was, imagine, Papa mismo ni-recognize ang role ng Bishop Ulama Conference. The world recognized it. In fact, imitated in many parts of the world. Ang daming mga nangyaring mga conferences sa Jakarta wherein bishops and ulama gather. Yung mga ibang conflict areas in the world, ginagaya yung nangyari sa Bishop Ulama Conference kasi simple lang naman ang ginagawa ng Bishop Ulama Conference sa Mindanao. Pag nagputukan, immediately, nagmi-meet yan. Anong kasunduan nila? Lahat ng ulama, on a Friday at noon, will speak and say, itong gera na ito ay political between the government and some of our brothers. Hindi ito Christianity versus Islam. Hindi ito religious. Yan ang issue. And then all the priests in Mindanao, in their sermons on a Sunday, will say the same thing if there's conflict. Lagi nilang ina-emphasize that Muslims and Christians have lived together for generations. And we should continue to do so. Yan lang, to me, that is the most important action na ginagawa ng Bishop Ulama Conference. And I don't mean Catholics only, kasama mga Protestante dyan eh. Yan ang nawala. Dito sa pinaka-crucial na putok sa Zamboanga, absent ang Bishop Ulama Conference. So I think that it's about time that that institution be encouraged to surface. Ay natatakot sumurface yan eh kasi alam niyo naman yung isang miyembro niya ay napajero bishop no issue.
Okay. I was in Zamboanga the other Saturday and Sunday, and I asked Monsignor Chris Manongas, the Apostolic Administrator of Zamboanga, and he said there is no religious conflict here because our churches, which are in mortal range, were never harmed by the Muslims. There is no factor of religious conflict here. The only time na nabaril yung simbahan sa Tetuan nung magkubli ang mga sundalo at pulis sa simbahan. Pero kung hindi nagkubli yung mga pulis at militar, di maayos. Tess, you have a follow-up? Please, pakisuyo lang. This is the longest forum we have so far. Tatapusin na natin to.
Maganda yung naipalawa.
Matatalino yung panelists sa kaya audience.
Maganda yung naipalawanag niyo kasi hanggang ngayon, kung hindi natin makikita yung papel ng mga civilians at saka yung papel mismo ng peace process, palagay ko hindi matatapos itong gera. At yung gera ay magiging daan para patuloy na magwatak-watak. Exactly as you were saying, Secretary, na hindi dapat magamit ang gera for the sake of the war unless an external group is going to benefit from it.
Yung external factor, pumapasok lang yan pag may opportunity. Alam naman nila na hindi sila pwedeng basta-basta nakikialam eh. So, hindi pinlano yung external effort. Tingin ko sumasakay sa sitwasyon. Ang nalulungkot lang ako is that there is no consolidated response from the religious community. Kailangan consolidated yung response. And it should be Mindanao-wide. Even Nur Miswari listens to a Mindanao-wide appeal, no? Kung hindi kaya ng gobyerno, dapat patibayin yung institusyon on the side of the non-government groups to do something. Kaya lang may malaking problema kasi tayo dyan eh. May vacuum kasi din yung mga pinapawalan ni Pinoy na access sa mga obispo at saka sa mga ulama hindi naman katanggap-tanggap. No? Yun ang problema natin.
Pahabol ni Sol Vancy. Sol?
Sa dinami-dami ng mga peace agreements na nagdaan, umpisa tayo sa square one, sino pa ang magtitiwala sa gobyernong ito na magkakaroon na naman ng bagong peace talk na naman at bagong peace agreement na mukhang base sa ating kasaysayan, wala na namang mangyayari.
Yun ang tanong.
Sabi ni Senator Kit, di palitan ng gobyerno. Ano?
Ganun ba kadali yun?
Ganun kadali yun kung simple. Pero ito yan. Ibang klase ang Mindanao. Hindi naman sa iniinggit ko yung mga Taga-Luzon. Alam mo ang Mindanao, because it's really, ang Mindanao, parang Pilipinas yan Lahat ng uri ng Pinoy nasa Mindanao May Ilocano, may Bicolano, lahat tayo nagtipon-tipon dyan sa Mindanao. Kaya Mindanao is like the Philippines. Di ba? Melting pot yan. Pero may magandang nangyari sa Mindanao. Aktibo ang Mindanao sa dialogue, sa mga pag-uusap. Ang katakot-takot ang NGO dyan, POS organization. Very militant ang Mindanao. Ngayon, dumating tayo sa puntos na yung Bishop Ulama Conference was the coordinating institution of all of this, especially in the matter of peace. No? Kasi ang maganda sa Bishop Ulama Conference, hindi sila nabiktima ng sakit ng mga NGO. Ang NGO kasi may sakit I hope mga NGO rin kami ay maranasan natin makita natin ito. Ang mga NGO kung minsan, mas importante yung proseso kaysa sa yung objective ng proseso. Kaya nadidinig natin yung ating peace process na, hindi nagkapirmahan. Hindi ibig sabihin failure. Hindi failure yan kasi sinunod naman ang proseso Di ba? Ang pag sinusunod ang proseso, ang sinasabi, okay lang yan. Even if the process is no longer leading to the desired result. You see? Yan ang problema. But hopefully in Mindanao, magkakaroon ng initiative not necessarily coming from government. Because ang mga groups in Mindanao are capable of doing things on their own.
So pwede maging independent republic?
Wag naman sana. Federal lang.
Federal.
Pwede.
Yun lang binabanggit ni Nene Pimentel last week. Messages from our panelists. Ano pong mensahe ninyo sa ating mga tagapakinig?
Yun po ay, muli po ay nagpapasalamat kami sa ating mga kasamang taga-media na nabibigyan kami ng mga pagkakataon na matalakay yung kasalukuyang problema na kinakaharap ng mga taga-Hacienda Luisita. At gayon din ay nagpapasalamat kami kay Mr. Melo na siyang nag-ibita sa amin dito upang talakayin nga yung issue. Muli, maraming salamat po.
Opo. Si Richard may kausap yata sa telepono. Pero may pahabol yata si Dan Pasha. Dan, ano yung announcement mo? Sandali lang. Sige, go ahead.
1 year after, I'm Dan Pasha. 1 year after Neri Soturo's still, we started the commemorative masses inside the Paubi Park. And that was said by Father Martin at the Clarets.
Claretians.
Yeah, he's still here, retired, as parish priest at Maculada Concepcion at the UP Village. Now, off and on, I've been doing it with him in many places. Likewise, Father Bob Reyes did some masses also for not just Father Neri Satur, but for other martyrs, priests especially. Many priests in Mindanao, if you are not aware, were killed because they were stopping the illegal and the destructive. There are many legal mining which are very destructive. And logging, mining and logging. Doon lang sa isang grupo ng mga pare-pime, 3 na ang napatay.
Okay.
Anyway, we're doing it on October 14 again at the Malate Church, at the Clarets Immaculada Concepcion by Father Martin, or maybe I'll arrange it with Mayor Bautista to put one mass. And then, of course, Malate Church is the center. As I wrote, Cardinal Gonzales then, Batanggenyo, that the masses at the Martyr Church of Malate should be also for green martyrs.
Okay.
Not just priests are killed, Orly Flores is a bantay dagat guy in Zambales. Niratrat siya ng 3 tao with M16. Patay.
Anong oras yung misa?
Well, misa lang yun. And then after
Anong oras?
that, magkakaroon ng konting exchange. Si
Anong
Father Pete, na pinagmisa ko sa Paubi about 2 years ago, Father Pete ng OFM, sabi niya, the corruption is to the top. Dante. Ano ibig mong sabihin? Don't quote me, please, ha?
On the record dyan.
Yeah, well, anyway, up to the desk of the secretary, sabi niya. That's why si Boy Miranda was asked to start the task force again. Alam mo, he got fired. Sinara yung illegal logging task force ng mga luko sa DNR. Sapagkat alam nila, at may lumapit sa isang director, Dante, pag tinuloy niyo yung ginagawa niyo, so 10 director, 2 lang matitira sa DNR.
Okay.
Dahil noon katindi ang korupsyon. Thank you. 14, may misa sa Malate Church alas 7 ng umaga. Kung gusto nyo alas 6, i-arrange natin yan. I'm going to the CDCP to allow Father Martin again to put up a mass at the elliptical road circle.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Salamat. Pahabol na talong? Oh.
After your tapayan, tatadan, sa 14, nagpapamisa kami sa umaga doon. And then, right after lunch, magla-lunch, which I will arrange with the Reyes family.
Sige.
Dito, right after Tapatan.
Sige. Akala ko tapayan na tayo. Delikado yan. Tapayan yan. Matagal tayo. Okay, please.
Yung pinakamainit na diskusyon natin, yung Mindanao conflict, nakakalungkot na lalo na yung kabataan ngayon, hindi naintindihan yung historicity ng Mindanao conflict. And I think the former Secretary Advisor, National Security Advisor is correct, na siguro kailangan, we have to educate, no? Professor Heydarian. At for us to educate the people, para maintindihan, kasi bias kuminsan yung pagtanaw eh. Lalo na kay Norberto na sa kanila parang rebelde nangyari, outlawed. No?
Okay.
Pero kung maitatama natin na hagipin natin, sabi nyo nga, ang Mindanao conflict, hindi naman kahapon o isang buwan lang nagsimula. Kailangan maintindihan. And I think you will agree with me, I suppose, that the working paper that we have to start with is to come up with the official map of the Philippines that includes the territories, no, ceded by Spain to the United States during the Treaty of Paris.
Okay.
I think that should be the working paper na dapat. Kasi kung titingnan natin ang mapa, whether official or commercial, ay hanggang doon lang sa Palawan, hanggang doon lang sa Zamboanga, hanggang doon lang sa Batanes. Hindi kasama ang Marianas, hindi kasama ang Guam, hindi kasama ang Sabah. So I think the official map of the Philippines must be the working paper that we have to start with in order to politicize and educate our people.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Professor, looking into your, hindi na crystal ball yan eh. iPad na yan eh. Ano mangyayari sa Pilipinas sa mga susunod na araw?
Seriously?
Seriously?
That's a question. Honestly, I don't expect much to really happen in the coming days. I think much of the attention will be perhaps on the visit of John Kerry, all of this crisis over Obama and the shutdown in the United States. Incidentally, actually, I went out because I had interviewed by this American institute, which they were really asking a question whether anong tingin ng Pilipinas ngayon sa United States and nag-shutdown sila. I mean, and sabi ko, well, I think it's time for us to rethink our policy of being so confrontational towards China and so dependent on the United States. And I think at least for the next coming days, that will be the question that will occupy us. Kasi sa tingin ko, problema natin ngayon is that we're facing problems on 3 fronts. On the external front, we have this big issue of territorial disputes with China. On the southern front, we have this crisis in Zamboanga, which, by the way, is not over. Then we have this escalation of mobilizations as far as the corruption issue is concerned, but we have no clear platform forward. I just want to clarify that when I said short-term memory, I didn't say that people will forgive and forget what happened. Obviously not. What we see right now is the reflection of pent-up frustrations. Alam naman natin na corrupt talagang Pilipinas. I mean, this is not a new information. It is just that that now we have some people who have the courage and other people who are being compelled to come forward and make all of these revelations. And parang ang problema natin ngayon is information overload. Parang ang daming tao na pwedeng corrupt. Saan tayo magsimula? Yun yung problema. So, sa tingin ko, in the coming days, we have to sort out what is going to be our foreign policy. And second, in dealing with corruption issues, saan tayo magsimula? Kasi ang problema, walang may moral ascendancy. Walang moral ascendancy ang administration for allegedly misusing DAP. Walang moral ascendancy din rin yung opposition, which is accusing the government, especially people like Chingo Estrada. So I think we have to sort out how we move forward. And this panel discussions perhaps is a small contribution to that particular issue.
Thank you very much. Secretary Gonzales, kayo raw po ang punot dulo bagay may crisis. Ano po magaganap?
Well, I'm praying harder these days. I'm praying for a real opposition to come forward.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Senator?
Well, marami po tayong problema. Pagtagpi-tagpiin po natin yan. Pero yung lumilitaw na overall big picture, dapat po maging malinaw sa ating mga kababayan. Kailangan po ugatin na natin. Anong kailangan natin gawin? Naghanap tayo ng oposisyon, wala pong oposisyon. Pero ang totoo po, dalawang pwersa na lamang ang nakikita ko ngayon. Yung mga politiko at ang taong bayan. These are the two forces in conflict. Nasaan po tayo? Taong bayan tayo.
With that, we bring to a close our special edition on what's going on. Anyare. Maraming pangyayari. Current events po tayo. Sa lahat ng ating panelists, maraming salamat po. Sa lahat ng mga dumalo, maraming salamat po. Mabuhay tayong lahat.